hippopotamus. Ah!
Salutations, everyone, and welcome back to the Untitled Marvel Project, the show here at Backlog Banter where we discuss the most recent Marvel thing. And the most recent Marvel thing, as of right now, is the Moon Knight series season finale. I presume this is going to be a season 2. I am joined by the deranged killer that I usually keep locked up in a sarcophagus, Tucker Hazel. I'm
how's
Dan
it going,
Dykstra. And as I said earlier, we are talking about the season finale of Moon Knight and talking about it as a whole, giving sort of our general thoughts, looking back on this this journey that we were brought along on with Oscar Isaac and Ethan Hawke and other people who are in the series.
Yep.
But more importantly, before we get to all that, I want you to subscribe to Backlog Banter. I want you to like the video. I want you to share your thoughts on Moon Knight in the comments or in the Discord. That link is in the description. There, you can talk about each and every member. You can talk about each and every member. You can talk about Moon Knight. You can talk about Moon Knight. You can give your thoughts and opinions on your favorite member of BLB and why it should be me.
Absolutely.
Well,
let's not give them any ideas.
You already said absolutely. So
Shit!
I'll hold you to it. But Tucker, what did you think of? Let's talk about just generally the episodes of Moon Knight we haven't discussed. So episode 4, 5, and 6. How do you think you felt about the wrap up of this show?
I think it's okay.
Yeah.
I think the second half of the season has more ups and downs than the first half, which I felt was much more consistent. Because episodes 4, 5, and 6 are very truncated in terms of the locations that are taking place in, the character arcs and moments that are happening in each of these 3 episodes. And so it does feel like a boom, 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 like they're shifting back and forth. I thought episode 4, which as we discussed before we started recording, is the one where they engage in a little bit of tomb raiding, is okay.
Yeah.
I think it's a fine episode. I think the way that Khonshu sacrifices himself is pretty interesting. I think that's the episode that maybe, except for 3, maybe that Layla is the most involved with, and I liked her dynamic becoming more involved with Steven especially in that episode. But I do think that the highlight of the series in terms of its uniqueness comes at the end of that episode and leading into episode 5, which is why I feel like there's just something sticking out in the middle of the second half of the season. Episode 5 is unlike the rest of the series, I think, to its benefit, but maybe to the detriment of everything else, because it does throw a few things into question. But I liked episode 5 a lot. I think that's where we obviously where we learn the most backstory and character moments about Mark Spector especially. And everything that sets up in terms of mythology and lore, I think, is quite fantastic. Unfortunately, even though I enjoyed it in the moment, I don't think episode 6 stuck the landing.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of devolved into, this is an end to an action adventure series, is it not? And so because of that, I would personally say, because pacing issues, a little bit of disconnect from the action adventure aspect of it myself, some mediocre action on the whole, I'd say, in places. This is my personal least favorite Marvel show live action. Not What If. What If is certainly worse than this, but I still think it's good. I think that the second half of the season didn't really raise me up the way I wanted it to, but I'm happy it exists. And I'm gonna come in guns blazing when after you give your initial thoughts with a prescriptive statement.
A prescriptive statement? Well, I
I
can't
don't know
wait
if
to
that's
hear
the right
it, Tucker.
word, but that's big word. Sounded fun to say.
It sounded fun to say, and it sounded smart as well. And you sounded smart throughout your analysis of those 4 episodes, because I largely agree. Oh yeah, sorry, 3 episodes. I like.
3 star.
I think episode 4 and 5 are, they're among my favorites. I don't really exactly remember. You know what? I was high on the beginning of the series as well. Episode 1 and 2 are also very good. But I think 4 and 5 are my favorite, just because we get some tomb raiding, some tomb busting, maybe perhaps, as you said, and we get the fantastic cliffhanger at the end of episode 4, going into episode 5 and fleshing out. I think episode 5 is maybe one of the best instances of character building we've gotten in a singular episode of a Marvel Disney Plus series.
Maybe some WandaVision moments notwithstanding.
Yes.
Who knows?
There are some detriments to that. As we discussed privately, the whole thing of Mark's mom in those flashback, fleshing out Mark's childhood sequences, just being just
cartoonishly evil,
just on the nose, being like, "I hate you because you killed your brother." I blame you for your brother's death. I am gonna abuse you now.
Yeah.
Smack, smack, smack with a belt.
It really comes off as the evil stepmom kind of. Although she's not his stepmom, but like that sort of archetype of ridiculously over the top in terms of evil.
Just handle it with
parent.
a bit of subtlety. Like, you don't have to explicitly say. She doesn't have to scream at him, "You killed your brother, and I blame you for it." Just a bit of subtlety is all I ask. A subtleness.
I think that the concept, and honestly, I didn't know any of that about Moon Knight's character. I don't know if this is the same Mark Spector origin or I guess Stephen Grant origin from the comics.
I don't read comics because I'm not a nerd.
But I like that conceptually. I think it really does flesh out the origin of these characters. It gives Mark Spector a lot more nuance in terms of, up until that point, he was basically just the mercenary guy, but now he's got this tortured past and darker side that has sort of created both Steven as a persona, but also shoehorned him into being more violent. I think that's all good. I just think that because it was all relegated to just this episode, and not even just this episode, just a fraction of this episode, it feels like, all right, we need to get to know Mark's mom and dad, which we don't, because they're just Mark's mom and dad, and the only time we really see Mark's mom is when she's being mean to him. So it doesn't really feel like a natural progression to that conflict happening. It's like, this is something that happened in the past, which of course it did. I like the way that they play with it in terms of they have to mend their combined heart because there's been this divide for the whole time, and I think that is episode 5 is where the Mark and Steven relationship is certainly at its peak, and I think it leads to some good moments in episode 6, but it is not played off in episode 6 in the way it frankly should have been.
Yeah. And even that being said, I do love the subtle recontextualization of Mark and Steven's relationship and their sort of dynamic, because up until the point of where you learn that Steven was created as, this sort of fractured persona for Mark, to deal with his own fear and his anger, or not even his anger, just his like straight up fear and like confusion about why his mom hates him. It's a really interesting recontextualization of what we knew about these two characters previously. That being that Steven is the meek, cowardly, shrewd? Not shrewd.
Yeah, that works. Why should it not work?
Like a British man who works at a museum and can't stand up for himself, while Mark is the rough and tumble, I've killed a million guys mercenary guy.
Yeah.
And the sort of inversion that happens there, where Mark is in fact the one who can't handle his own fear and created Steven to deal with that, is very interesting. Now, Tucker, is that played out in the season finale?
No.
Exactly.
I think the interesting thing about this season finale is that it kind of seems to drop. It was what we were worried about, frankly, with the end of the season. Like, wow, all right, well, they're going to get the Moon Knight suit back at the end of episode 5 at least, right? Like, and Khonshu's got to be freed pretty quickly because we got to be able to move back to what's going on. But they did backload episode 6 with a lot of, we have to get these things done to return to a somewhat status quo.
Yeah, I think the nature of this episode being like checking things off a checklist, like we have to do the ritual, and then we have to go to this place, and we have to break the statue, and then these people are going to come, so we have to defeat them when we have to go to this other place, and now we have to do this ritual, and all these things compiling on top of each other in probably a sub 40-minute thing if you take off the credits. It's really rushed.
Yeah, and I also do think that the potential of releasing Amit and dealing with Arthur Harrow and how Khonshu and Amit's history plays into all this, and of course Mark and Steven returning from the dead and regaining their Moon Knight powers and then losing them, quote unquote, as we'll get to with the post credits. I don't think it was handled with the nuance that it should have been, because it felt like we have to get these other things done.
Yeah.
And other things getting done were the less interesting aspects of that. I mean, I would have loved to learn more about how Mark and Steven were feeling about returning to the Moon Knight role, and how Khonshu was thinking about that, and Layla's very underutilized in terms of emotional beats in this last episode, and Amit is there. And one thing I do want to commend, I'd say this last half of the show is the CGI got way better.
Yeah, if you compare episode 1 to episode 6, oh boy. Oh boy.
Yeah, I think that especially the animation on Taweret and Khonshu and Amit all looks great. The field of reeds, all this stuff, I think does look very good. And I also do think that episode 6 gives a spark to the action that I don't think the rest of the series had. It was just hand-to-hand combat, action adventure stuff, jumping off buildings, punching guys, that kind of stuff. But with episode 6, you introduce the idea that Khonshu can give Moon Knight sort of gliding powers that he's using. And of course, I think what will really make the action of Moon Knight special going forward, I really wish, it doesn't really make sense story-wise, but I wish they'd been able to lean this a little bit further or earlier, is the active switching between Mark and Steven's Mr. Knight and Moon Knight personas in the middle of combat to sort of do fucking wombo. It's like Sheik and Zelda in fucking Smash Brawl. Like,
so true.
you know what I'm fucking talking about. But the way that they're switching back and forth and their personalities are now melded into one, I think that's going to make for a lot more interesting visually combat in the future.
Yeah. Something that I did not see coming that also plays into how combat could be used going forward, and thinking about a season 2 or a next Moon Knight appearance, is Layla now has abilities of sorts.
Yes.
She is the avatar for Taweret.
Yes.
And instead of getting a hippo costume, she gets a scarab costume, which way cooler. And apparently, her in the comics, her father was the Scarlet Scarab, so that might be her name going forward.
So this character I think will be really interesting to follow, because from what I can tell, aside from, I don't know, maybe Michelle Jones in the Spider-Man movies, she's one of the first original superheroes.
Yes.
Like, this character of Layla Al-Fuli is an entirely original character, not based loosely on things from the comics that are obviously not fully played out here. And I'm really interested to see how they take her character, because I really hope she sticks around, because that costume is great. I thought her action of basically being Falcon, but pulling up the wings and using them to slice people and stuff, I thought that looked really cool. I love them teaming up together, though they didn't have to do it, but the "are you an Egyptian superhero? I am" moment really on the fucking nose.
Well, yeah, here's the thing.
Really
here's the
on the
thing.
nose.
I like that moment. It's important for people to see themselves reflected in different superhero media and all kinds of media as well. But as I was talking about with maybe the Mark's mom thing, a bit of subtlety. Like, don't maybe give it a second draft. Maybe don't literally use the lines, "Are you an Egyptian superhero? I am." Like, do a little bit something. Put a little heart. Put a little effort into there.
It does feel like, all right, we've got our first Egyptian superhero in the MCU. Great, her costume's awesome. She's a female superhero.
How are people going to know that she's the first Egyptian superhero?
How are people supposed to know that this is inspiring to a young Egyptian girl? All right, well, we'll have a scene where she saves a young girl, and there's a moment where you can see the inspiration in that girl's eyes. What's the dialogue gonna be? Well, okay. For starters, she asks if she's an Egyptian superhero, and she says that she is.
Obviously,
perfect. All right, and then they just
forgot
to give that another pass. And I do think that kind of feels like a lot of this last episode is Moon Knight. Up to this point, I think felt fresh because it was taking, for the most part, I think in its best moments, taking action adventure tropes and fueling them with Mark's persona and Steven's persona and the Egyptian lore and stuff like that in a way that made it unique. But a lot of this episode did feel like I've seen these kind of things before. You've got to have the guy standing on top of the pyramid and not there wasn't a purple sky laser. It was close.
Just a little light. Just a little light on top.
He was like charging up to get a laser. It didn't quite get there. And the battle between the two giant gods and stuff like. It didn't feel as original.
Well, I think it's just because, like I said, this is a 40-minute finale, less than probably. It is the shortest of any MCU Disney Plus finales. Is
that true? Okay.
Yeah, it is. And I think you can feel it. We're just, when we're in that final action scene, we are just bouncing around. We see, it took me a while to realize, Khonshu and Amit are literally 5 stories tall and fighting next to the pyramids of Giza.
Yeah.
Like, why
That
isn't
is real. His cane pushes away a car or something.
Exactly, and why isn't that like a big centerpiece, a load bearing pole column of this action sequence?
Sure.
But we're just bouncing around between a lot of things, and I think it is a time issue because the action sequences, that sequence and the simultaneous sequence going on where, like you said, Mark and Steven are sort of switching between the Moon Knight and the Mr. Knight persona, and Layla's there, she's using her powers for the first time. All cool stuff. And I wish it would have been, given more time, is the thing.
I also think that
really what's lacking in this finale.
I think that also ties around the fact that both Amit and Arthur Harrow are very poorly utilized in this last episode. Episode 4, Harrow is backgrounded because we're doing some tomb raiding, which, by the way, I do think that could have really been trimmed down. I don't think that needed to be essentially an entire episode. And then Arthur is an interesting component of episode 5 because it's playing with reality in terms of is he actually a therapist or not, like that kind of thing. But he wasn't really brought back into the fold in an important way in this last episode because I did feel like there was room to give him a more compelling emotional arc of why he's doing this. But
they try it a little bit though because because he has imbalance in his heart and he's like, okay, kill me or whatever. That's what you're all about. And she's like, nah, actually, you're cool. You're gonna be my avatar. Yeah,
and there's questions about that. Yeah. It's like, so Arthur wasn't being told from the Ushabti by Amit to free her. He just chose to do this, but then she's going against her own thing to have him be her avatar. Like, there's questions in that, and I think that kind of knocks down one of the most interesting parts of this, which is of this whole series, which is the infusion of Egyptian lore and teaching us about avatars and the Ennead and all this stuff. Which, by the way, the Ennead, so fucking useless.
They get the fucking floor mopped with them in this
off
episode.
Screen.
Yeah, off screen too.
Literally, yeah.
Speaking
and also,
off screen,
they never manifest abilities like Osiris and fucking Ra and like Horus and like these gods never.
We don't get names.
Avatars.
We don't get names for any of those characters except for that one, the other lady who's there.
I believe the main lore-looking guy is Osiris's avatar.
Well, he got fucking mopped. He got swept. Yeah. All right, so
whatever, he doesn't have abilities.
Take this L, Ennead, I guess.
Yeah.
Speaking of not seeing action sequences, I think it's fair to talk about the big sting at the end of this episode, the post-credit scene, and where season 2 will likely jump off from, which is the fact that we've held with bated breath this entire series. All right, where's Jake Lackley? We know that Jake Lackley is an integral part of Moon Knight's character. Where's Jake Lackley? I can't wait to see Jake Lackley. Is he going to have a mustache? Is he not going to have a mustache? All these important questions.
How would him having a mustache work, like physically?
Don't know, but it'd be fun, wouldn't it? But
you just want mustache representation.
I do. It's important to see everyone represented in superhero media, and I want a superhero with a mustache.
You know who has a similar mustache to you? Arthur Harrow.
Oh,
and you and Arthur Harrow, very similar personality-wise.
No, his is more tweedly. He's got a more tweedly old man mustache. But anyway, getting back on subject here, we do see Jake Lackley. It is revealed that he is the secret third personality that is this vicious, basically no moral compass from what it seems like. He'll just kill whoever, whenever, when he needs to. And that's the character that Mark or Steven has been blacking out to and waking up surrounded by a number of bloody bodies.
Yeah, a handful of times.
Yes, and he is directly working with Khonshu. I think people have gone back and confirmed this. Like, Khonshu says, yes, I will free the two of you from my service. Not obviously not including Jake Lackley.
Yeah.
In the post-credit scene, Jake Lackley kills Arthur Harrow after taking him out of this mental institution. He's a Spanish hitman, it seems, and that's where season 2 will jump off from, is Mark and Steven working together, but discovering Jake Lackley as another element of their persona, and, basically being against their will working for Khonshu once again. So, interesting. I'll see where it goes. but I feel like it has a danger to be a rehash of this first season, just with Mark and Steven instead of just Steven trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm interested to see what they do with all these set up Moon Knight characters in the future. But I haven't got my prescriptive statements yet. Let's finish up talking about this, and then we'll get to the prescriptive statement.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
By the way, I still don't know if that's the correct word to use for this.
Let's say it is. For sake of argument, let's say it is.
But I do worry a little bit. I'm not excited. I'm not anticipating. Oh, how are they going to react to Jake Lackley? It's like, yeah, they're going to figure out he's there, and they're going to be mad at Khonshu, and it's going to be conflict between them and Jake, and okay.
They'll probably discover that Jake has some sort of moral compass, and then they'll probably all three of them rebel against Khonshu, but somehow maintain the Moon Knight powers at the end of the series.
Yeah, and also how will Mark/Steven wear the costume if they're technically not under Khonshu's control anymore?
All good questions.
It's all questions, but not questions I'm particularly excited to see answers to, because it did feel like, oh, okay. I'm like, my heart was racing. I'm like, okay, Moon Knight, Sting. How is this going to spin into more content? What is the future of these characters? And it was just another Moon Knight story. And not in a way that I feel like other sequels and continuations of stories for Marvel characters have always added an extra twist. This is the Spider-Man story. He's in Britain this time.
Yeah.
This is Iron Man 3. He's not gonna have the suit for part of it. Like, maybe I'm not.
The twist could still be coming too, as well.
That's true.
We just got like a seed.
This is like 3 years. So
exactly.
We've got time to figure out about it, and they've got time to and I don't doubt that it's going to be an enjoyable story. And I'm not personally someone who leans so heavily on the source material because I'm not experienced with the Moon Knight source material to worry how they're changing Jake Lackley or anything like that. As long as it is a good story within its own, that's fine by me. And I also feel similarly to the changes to Miss Marvel, which is surprisingly soon, by the way. We've got one fucking month and that comes out. Jesus Christ. But my claim here, all right?
Okay,
if I want to wrap this
statement.
up, this is what the fuck just happened? This is my least favorite Marvel show. Not because I think it's bad. I really love the ideas that it sets up. I really love Oscar Isaac's performance. But I feel that the MCU works at its best when it recognizes its self-referentiality and its integral storytelling and its setups and payoffs of earlier things and intertwined nature of stories here affecting stories there. And this show opts for, and I think maybe this is why a lot of people are enjoying it, but opts to be entirely disconnected. As far as I know, there's like maybe one Easter egg to other things in the MCU, period, in this whole show. And I think that's interesting, but for me, it didn't feel right. I was always waiting for something else to happen, and I feel that disconnecting it so heavily kind of makes Moon Knight not feel important. Like, this is the first time where I finished the show and I'm like about to, or I'm thinking, oh, I'm gonna explain to my girlfriend who hasn't seen this, like, why is this important, or explain to Abram, or explain to Anna if she hasn't finished it. Like, you need to watch this because it'll be interesting going forward. Yeah. And I just don't feel like that's the case. And that's a benefit to other people, but I feel the MCU has created its own storytelling style that works so well for it that deviating from that means that this feels like an outlier, and in my opinion, in a bad way.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the question there is, and this is sort of the trick that Marvel Studios has pulled, is that even if the show or a movie isn't great, you need to watch it because it'll tie into other things.
Sure. Yeah.
And the question that needs to be asked now, seeing as Moon Knight seemingly isn't planning on doing that, at least for the foreseeable future, since there were no setups directly in the series.
Yeah.
Is it a good enough show on its own? So that's
for me.
Yeah,
I would say no. Like, I don't think it's a bad show, and I think if you're into action adventure stuff, mystery, dark combat sort of deal, sure, go watch it. It's a totally fine show. But I think as a part of the MCU, it doesn't hold the water that I apply to basically every other project because of its internet connected storytelling. Which, of course, this will tie into future projects. This will eventually become intertwined with fucking Blade and Black Knight and all this shit. Like
and Midnight Suns or what's
I
whatever.
don't doubt that
Yes.
this will be important eventually.
Yes.
But this is one of the first times in MCU history where I finish a project and I'm like, yeah, I don't really care where this goes next. Like, it'll happen.
Sure. Yeah. I can understand that. I think what you're saying makes sense. And I did have another thought that crossed my mind. And Tucker? What was I going to say about this in a lot of respects?
Yeah.
I think it's just interesting to think about like some tangential contextual things like. Oscar Isaac hasn't like confirmed that he's going to come back.
Yeah. Though what I've heard is that we're just in a new era of Marvel structuring where they do not have set contracts for a certain amount of projects.
Sure.
That's the change. It has nothing to do with him not wanting to be involved or they're not planning future projects.
Yeah. Speaking of structuring, I just remembered what I was going to say. Is that, going back to this point of, is this show good? It's a good enough show on its own, standalone, not connecting to the MCU in a lot of ways, and I think the series holds itself back. There are negative points to it that could maybe be hand waved away if it did connect to the MCU.
Sure.
It has these markings of an MCU project or show where it's 6 episodes that are each 40 minutes long, which, as we discussed privately as well, maybe isn't the best way to deliver a story or any of these.
That's how I think I want to close this. So finish your thing.
Any of these Marvel stories, really, is maybe not the best format. The fact that, this Kevin Feige, months and months ago was like, we are not holding back. You are going to see Moon Knight pin someone down and beat the living hell out of him. And not the case. Just literally not the case. There's some blood, but it's not like, oh my god, this is like a new echelon for Marvel Studios to break into in terms of violence and what we see on screen. So I feel like it holds itself back in a lot of the same respects that MCU projects do without the interconnective benefit.
Yeah. No, that's certainly true.
Yeah.
And so the last thing I want to say, and I think maybe this is I'm positive. I think it's a good show. I think it's a fine addition to the Marvel legacy, and I'm interested to see eventually how it ties in. I think all the other shows, for me at least, have justified their runtime by exploring topics and characters that I felt like warranted more screen time. And because we had their origins already established, we knew the dynamic between Sam and Bucky, we knew what Wanda was going through, so we didn't need to spend so much time setting up things and like wondering these questions of who is this person. I feel like this show showed me that why I'm not a huge into the format of TV shows, period, but this was the one where I was least interested week to week because I feel like I was just waiting for there to be something.
Yeah,
you're
waiting for the shoe to drop, essentially.
I was waiting for the shoe to drop, and episode 5, playing with reality. That's a shoe that dropped.
Cool. It was really cool,
and it was certainly the most interesting part of the show. I think, at least in my opinion. But I didn't feel like having like 240 minutes of runtime in this made it so much better to where it needed to be a show and couldn't have been a tightly scripted movie with a more focus on Layla's dynamic and a bigger focus on Arthur Harrow and stuff. Like, cut out episode 3 where they're trying to piece together the little cloth deal. Okay, that's fine. Cut out the tomb raiding or make that a 15-minute scene. Like, each of these things I think could have been trimmed down to where they feel more connected, the pacing feels better, and it tells a more compelling, grounded story focused. I feel like this show tried to cover a lot more ground than maybe it seems on the outside, to where I was like, I don't think that was worth like triple the amount of runtime that we get from the other MCU movies.
Yeah, I certainly think that this probably would have been better as a movie.
Yeah.
You could have had the more integrated sort of Tomb Raider-y, Indiana Jones-esque mood and tomb raiding and mystery action adventure thing throughout, and then supplement that with some Moon Knight action sequences that you could maybe take a little bit of a risk with, with a film. But yeah, I mean, I still come down on it. If I'm going to give my general thoughts here, I think Moon Knight is good. I think it probably, having not rewatched some of the earlier ones like WandaVision and The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I think it's probably my second or third favorite. I flip flop with it around Hawkeye. And we'll get to we'll probably rewatch all these in due time for our classic show here, UMP, where we rank all these series. But we're waiting on our dear friend Abram Buhner to buckle up and be a big boy and watch a TV show for once in his life. That isn't The Big Bang Theory. But where I come down on it is it's a good show. Is it a good enough standalone show on its own? No, it falls short in like pacing areas that a lot of other like prestige television shows of its budget and stature excel at. Yeah. And it doesn't really connect to the MCU in a lot of ways where I can overlook that like I do with some other things. And maybe that's not fair to do, to not critique some of these shows fully, but I think there is something to be said for the interconnectivity that Marvel Studios has created with these movies and television series. So, that being said, I still think Moon Knight is good. I will be ready to rewatch it, and who knows how much time will pass between now and when we get around to it for our UMP ranking. But I would say if you're interested, definitely check it out. It's not bad by any stretch of the imagination.
No, of course. And I think that the critiques I had don't take away from it enough to where... I do want to say is I'm not someone who enjoys episodic storytelling in general. This same sort of blasé attitude has frankly kind of applied to almost every series we've seen. And not because they were bad, but because I don't... Like, week to week, I'm excited to see the new episode when it comes out, but then I'm just like, whew... This is going to be over at some point. Like, I think that I might enjoy it a lot more when I'm watching it back to back and watching within a week.
You're binging it, yeah.
Yeah. So I'll give it the benefit of the doubt for that. But go watch Moon Knight.
go watch Moon Knight. It is probably what we're going to come down on here. Yeah. Thank you for watching. We'll be back with Ms. Marvel in the summer when that starts. That'll maybe assuage all Tucker's feelings toward television eventually. We'll see.
I don't know. I'm worried.
And of course, we will be talking about Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness
tomorrow.
Tomorrow. That video will go up tomorrow as well. That'll be the new Marvel thing that we're talking about on UMP. And then finally, we'll be getting back into our MCU ranking. We'll be kicking it up again with 2014's Guardians of the Galaxy.
What a great way to restart that.
That is the plan, unless something goes horribly wrong, which it always could. Yeah. So, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
Gear up like you're about to like give birth or whatever. What's a breathing pattern?
Isn't like
Yeah, it's like the Friday the 13th.
That's how your wife is gonna give birth to your firstborn child.
Yes. Like Jason Voorhees is about to fucking be brought into the world.